I'd like to introduce Dave Bergeron. Dave is the Senior Vice President of Venture Development for Rev1 Ventures. He works with our Rev1 clients on a daily basis, helping them through their market validation, reducing risk. He joined us from Silicon Valley, so thanks for coming out to Ohio. It's great weather, right?
Yes, sometimes.
So Dave's got a background in physics and mathematics, which is why Carl Sagan is his favorite author. So I'm going to pass it over to Dave, who's going to ask Bruce all these really hard questions. So take it away.
Thanks, Heather. And let me add my thanks for coming, and hopefully you'll get some interesting insights with one of my favorite opportunities that Bruce is running. But yes, I came from Silicon Valley, okay? And so somebody, investing in Silicon Valley is, math, software, microns, molecules, but typically not smelly biologics, okay? And so when I first came here in January of 2014, my office was on the other side of that wall, and Bruce promptly moved in 2 months afterwards, and it started to smell. So I got to get to know this guy. What is it you're doing over there? And so he promptly introduced me to what is a biologic, okay, and got me somewhat excited about bugs, but I wasn't very excited about bugs. But the delivery system he used, I was very excited about. So we're going to get into that. And the process that you might find interesting is the way he managed through a product pivot. But prior to that, let me give you a little bit of his background, which I wrote down so I wouldn't forget. He has over 30 years in customer discovery and product innovation leadership. He worked at Procter & Gamble, so he knew how to sell things to consumers as well as companies. And then he went to Scott's Miracle-Gro. He's a senior vice president of R&D at Scott's. Okay, so he had the acumen to put together a pretty decent business model and how to get the business opportunity of probiotics for plants in Ohio. He has led numerous sustainable initiatives at both Scott's and P&G. He was connected with the Ohio State and the advisory board of College of Food and Agriculture, Environmental Science, and is a mentor at the Fisher College of Business. He previously ran it was a NanoMed Inc. As a startup. So he has 2 startups. This is your second, right? This is the one that's going to work, right?
Correct.
Correct. Okay, good. The winner, yes. He won a Andhra Pradesh Global Startup Challenge Award and numerous other awards in 2018. Okay, and you may have read about him on our webpage or his blog or whatnot. But his product is exciting, and in the world of agriculture, which I learned over the last couple of years, probiotics, augmenting and or replacing fertilized solutions in agriculture is accelerating. So 2 things. 1, he had an interesting business model. 2, we'll take you through the pivot. So for those of you who are in startup land, we're constantly coaching our startups. What is the correct feature that might sell in your market? This is an interesting story because you started with product A and ended up with product A, but most importantly, product B, which we'll talk to. So let me introduce Bruce. And to get this started, I thought I'd just ask him a couple of questions and we can just get educated with your response. But why don't you start with just a brief history of what you did in 2014 across my whole, or the history of 3Bar Biologics in a couple of paragraphs.
Okay, yeah, sure. Well, thanks everybody for coming. Get some more food while you're here. So where I really came into agriculture, I'm a chemical engineering by background with an MBA, and so most of my career was at Procter & Gamble, and it was really when I went to Scott's and got trained up by some really good agronomists and got to work with some people like Professor Caldwell here at Ohio State that really got me interested in production agriculture, and number 1, how important it was, but number 2, how significant the opportunity was to improve both the productivity as well as the sustainability of agricultural practices. And so that's really what got me excited. As I left Scott's, I knew I wanted to do something in agriculture, and because I had a pretty close relationship with Ohio State, I knew I was interested in doing some type of a spin out with Ohio State. So that was really the origin of the business. The big problem, kind of the light bulb problem for me, it did kind of happen when I was at Scott's. That we were for a number of years working on the biologics that are available in agriculture to reapply them into the consumer lawn and garden space, because that's kind of what Scott's does, is it takes agricultural technologies and turns them into consumer products. And John Moyer, who's with 3Bar now, was leading some of that effort. And we worked for years, and we never had any success with these living microbe products. These are kind of like probiotics for plants, which are really critical. The microbes in the soil, a plant can't grow without them. Just like humans, we can't digest our food without the microbes in our gut. Plants are kind of the same way. They can't absorb the nutrients they need and fight off stress and disease without the microbes in the soil and the relationship that exists between the plant and the microbes. So really interesting area of science that is just exploding with the price of doing genomic sequencing taking such a dive. It's enabled all kinds of cool research on microbiomes, and agriculture is certainly a part of that. What I really saw was a big gap between that research and the discovery work going on all these fantastic microbes and what they can do for plants, and what's happening in the hands of the farmer and how these products are being delivered, and the true experience that the farmer gets is far from what the researcher is experiencing when they originally discovered the microbe. And so that was the start of the company. That was the origin.
Thanks, Bruce. In your and I've got to know you past 5 years, but the personal drive to start a company. Okay, where did that come from? I mean, I want to build a product or whatnot, but to start a company is as we've learned together, not an easy thing to do.
Yeah. I would say in my case, everybody's story is a little different. I'm kind of a later in life entrepreneur, call it. So after, I worked for two of the oldest companies in Ohio, P&G and Scott's Miracle-Gro. And they were great companies, but I did kind of have a feeling of I don't want to do another corporate stint. I'd like to stay in Columbus. And so at that level, there's not too many senior vice president of R&D roles that I could get and stay in Columbus. And so doing a startup was attractive from that standpoint. I felt I had the kernel of an idea with a real problem definition that I had seen. And for me, the other thing that really fell into place was that, I got my MBA at night. I did all of my second-year coursework here at Ohio State and went through Michael Camp's program in Technology Entrepreneurship, and that was where the first startup, NanoMed, came from. And so I had that experience of how to do a spin-out with Ohio State and kind of wanted to do it again and have a success with it.
Great, thanks. Now, you mentioned working for P&G and Scott's. What are the takeaway characteristics, or what did you learn at those companies that helped you in your startup venture?
Yeah. Okay. Well, there's a ton there, but one of the things I would say another inspiration for starting a new company and working in a small company environment. What I experienced in the corporate world, particularly at Procter & Gamble, they hire the best, and there's just many, many great people in the company, but they're all kind of working at about 20% of capacity. And I could really feel that and sense that. Where I always enjoyed working in a corporate environment was where we could break it down into a really, a small company within the larger company. And I had a couple of those really fun experiences, but I had, many that weren't too. And so to me, a really important thing is ownership, and how can you inspire people to really care about what they're working on and feel like they have a personal level of ownership. And a lot of times that's lacking in a big corporate environment. But in a startup, everybody, it's really clear, everybody has to do everything, and everybody really knows what's going on. So I really enjoy that part.
And it kept you busy. For those of you who were here in February or end of January, you probably saw Bruce and his team running around like crazy characters, shipping their product to their first customer in the Q1.
Yeah, there was like a 4-week period there where my main job was running pallets back and forth from the warehouse to the dock to the warehouse. So I was doing well over 20,000 steps a day for a while.
Yeah, I just want to reemphasize, what you mentioned about yourself. Yeah, he has a great work ethic. He works his butt off, including moving pallets around when needed. Also, to be able to raise money. And I might add, you didn't mention it, but I've gotten to know you, a fair sense of paranoia. Okay, and I like that in a leader. Constantly, who else is out there, and who is might be doing something similar to what I'm doing, and always asking that question. So I think you learned well from both Scott's as well as PG. A little bit different question. 3Bar is based upon technology that's spun out of OSU. And you're on the advisory board of Food, Agriculture, and Environmental Science. What has the experience been like? Has it helped you? It helps you think through or advise, the agricultural skill going forward?
Okay, yeah. So I've had a long relationship with Ohio State, and to me, it's just it's a fantastic organization because it's just got a tremendous amount of breadth and depth in the research going on at Ohio State is I would say unparalleled. I don't know of any other university that has quite the scope that Ohio State has in a lot of areas, including agriculture, as one of the original land-grant universities. But I think also the size of Ohio State is a bit of its Achilles heel. And, coming from my experience at Procter & Gamble, how to work within a big, behemoth of an organization, it's kind of how Ohio State is. And so you gotta make those connections and develop a personal level of trust with a number of different professors. That to me is what has made the difference, and being able to have a really productive relationship with the university is those individual relationships and getting on common ground on how to translate technology from the academic sphere to industry and to ultimately the end user, so that research can have an impact on society.
Yeah, no, I agree and experienced firsthand your relationship building with the professors at the Ohio State. It's helped the company a lot. So let's get into this change in the business model. Okay, so I've been working with 3Bar for over 5 years, and he sells biologics, which are probiotics for plants, but also the delivery system, which is able to deliver these probiotics instead of 99% dead, 99% alive, in probably 1/10 the weight. Can you describe the process on what with your head or explain to the audience how long it took to successfully pivot from a focus from biologics to the supply chain delivery system?
Yeah. So when I first started the company, the professor I was working with, Brian Gardner, had a really interesting collection of microbes that he had discovered over a decade, a period of time, demonstrated the benefits. But they were all a type of bacteria that when you take them out of their natural environment, you take them out of the soil, they die off really easily. And so Brian and many other researchers had been discovering these types of microorganisms for quite some time, but very few good commercial products. And so that original problem of the company was, so how can we enable a farmer to get the same kind of experience that the postdoc researcher was getting as they did the research? And that's really, it was solving that issue that caused us to invent a delivery system, which we've now trademarked it as the live microbe on-site delivery system. It's a disposable fermentation device that the farmer actually operates themselves. With a push of a button, they can initiate a fermentation reaction, and there's no possible contamination. And so it enables a farmer, after 24 hours, they've basically got a really fresh population of our target microbe that delivers this benefit for the plant. That's exactly how the university originally tested it and discovered the benefit in the first place. And so we thought that, that's a really interesting way of enabling the farmer to, they've got to do a little bit of work. They got to press a button. They got to wait 24 hours. If we can get the farmer to overcome that little bit of hurdle, they can get an experience with a live microbe product that's not available anywhere else from anybody else.
Right, and your interaction with the farmers were aimed at trying to get them to do what you just described, a little bit of work. Now that's changed to interacting with agricultural companies, Pivot specifically, ICL. Could you comment on A, how that's changed your daily operations, and B, how the company's staffing outlook is evolving, because we're going to be changing that as well.
Yeah. So it has been a pretty significant change. I started out, doing 100 interviews with farmers in the state of Ohio, and really I wanted to understand what's going on the farm and understand, okay, if we put this package in the hands of a farmer and ask them to press a button and wait 24 hours, can they do that? Can they do it successfully? And can they get a good result? Because one of the things I learned at P&G was, if you're going to ask somebody to do something extra, they better see the benefit. If it's not more convenient, it better be better, and it better make money for them. And so I think we've been able to show that. And so one of the things that as we got into it, and really as I took on our first investment, and we kind of made the decision, okay, this is an investable company, and we want to take on some money so that we can fuel growth. One thing that was clear was that as a small company trying to sell product to farmers, we were going through some local distributors who have a lot of other things to sell, and so that's not the fast growth business model that we really need to be an investable company. And so at about that time, this was 2.5, 3 years ago, we started talking with other companies and other entities out there, at industry conferences and events like that, about what we were doing and about our delivery system, and really started to get some traction with a number of other companies, and some of them, very large, some of the largest ag companies, as well as other startups, about how we were, our approach to delivering microorganisms, because it was unique, and it really kind of changes the game as far as what can be delivered on the farm, and both the performance and the economics of how it can be delivered. And so that, as we were seeing, both our sales directly to farmers weren't growing as fast as we wanted, and at the same time, our conversations with other companies that you might consider to be our competitors, we actually approached them as our collaborators, and that has really led to the greatest growth of the company so far.
Yeah, exactly. Having worked with you on that plan for the audience, right? So the company migrated most of its business now to helping engage companies to use his delivery system to deliver either his bugs or some of their own bugs. Okay, and I believe that that's the holy grail for this company, and really could be a significant changing in the agricultural supply chain.
Yeah, but it has been a big change in, say, my daily focus. I don't spend nearly as much time. Well, I was out on the farm yesterday, but I'm not spending nearly as much time on the farm, and a lot more time, going to conferences, talking to other companies about our business model, and working on a collaborative approach on how we can work together. So it is kind of interesting. When I was at Scott's, I was on the other side of the table. And I was the head of R&D, and all these little companies were coming in to sell me their thing, and so I've been on the other side of the table. So I think it kind of helps. It allows me to approach even the largest companies in agriculture, Bayer, is the biggest ag company in the world now, just bought up Monsanto. And no problem having conversations with their whole team. So,
So for the new entrepreneurs in the room, the process for doing a pivot, can you talk a little bit about that? I mean, it took us about 2 to 3 years, but I think you laid the seeds of this process. It might be interesting to share that observation with the audience.
okay, yeah, and I don't know. I think the most important thing I would say is, you gotta be open to changing your idea, right? Because every company I've talked to has gone through a major pivot. It's just going to happen that what you originally thought was the great thing, there was maybe something there, but the way it's actually going to play out in the real world and where it might have the greatest application, there's just too many turns in the path. You can't see all those turns when you first start out, and so you just got to be open to, when those paths open themselves up, to look for the opportunity that resides within that. And I think for us, particularly when the part of agriculture that I didn't understand as well when I got into this business was the whole distribution side, how products get distributed out to farmers and how that whole part of the business works. And so as I was learning that through this startup experience, I think that really helped to inform our decision to really change, and the way to get this technology into the hands of more farmers and onto more acres is really through partnerships with other companies that have a variety of different distribution models, not just a single type of distribution model. And so I think that the partnership model that we've moved to allows us to do that, and it gives us a much greater potential on a worldwide basis to have an impact.
Yeah, and I might add on your behalf, right, I think the seeds that yourself and Jane would honestly look at the data of the sales as well as the data of what's going on in the probiotic land. And then as I would, other entrepreneurs, you had a plan and then you made a change to the plan in a very, very systematic, well thought through model. So unlike some other startups where you can consider them a yo-yo, they change their plan every 30 days. This is not what happened. Okay, and so I think that's a great deal to your success is being able to do this systematically and in a controlled and managed fashion.
Well, and we are still, selling product directly to farmers, still interacting with farmers, and I think we're learning from our collaboration partners when different distribution models. This, agriculture. Like a lot of areas, is kind of ripe for disruption in how the product is getting to the customer, and so the whole, the way it was done for the last 150 years through these large farmer-owned cooperatives, that whole system is really being challenged right now. And so I think we've got to stay open to different ways of getting, especially new technology, into the hands of these end users, because the average age of a farmer in America today is 65, but that's about to peak and start to go down. And as the younger farmers really start to take over the control of how the farms are being operated, they've got a different idea than their fathers and their grandfathers did about how to do it. And so it's getting to those leading edge farmers in a number of different ways. That's the key for us to really drive growth.
Slightly tangential question. You've grown your business a lot in the last year and a half, staffing-wise. Okay, could you comment, A, how you did that, and B, your plans going forward?
Yeah, sure. I think this is one area where being in this facility, being this close to Ohio State, has been a tremendous help for us. From the very start of the company, it started out, it was me and my wife, or me and my son, or me and an intern. And then when Jane Fife joined the company in 2016, we continued to hire more interns, and then as we were able to hire more full-time folks, Being in this area where there's Ohio State, there's Battelle, it's just a rich source of talent for us. And it's one reason that we love being here at Rev One is access to that kind of talent that's available so close right here. So, you might say we don't have enough diversity of thought, but we do have, we got one person from Michigan State, John, and we've got Grace as an intern from Virginia Tech to add a little diversity to the team, but we're kind of heavy on the Buckeye side.
Good, but from a vision point of view, if you had to say, where does 3Bar want to be 3 to 5 years from now? What would you, how would you respond?
Yeah, well, immediately we've to get through production this year, we kind of squatted in a big space on the other side of this building, and we're now actively working to lease that space and fill it up with some equipment so that we can automate our process a little bit and enable, say, a much higher volume and throughput. We think we can do that right here in this facility for the next couple of years and support, good 10x kind of growth. Beyond that, we're focused right now on corn farmers in the Midwest, but there's a lot of other crops, there's a lot of other geographies around the world that we're interested in, and we've got a number of different experiments going on. So we absolutely want to have a global impact.
Great. So at this point, I'd like to, turn it to the audience. I've worked with Bruce, as said, for quite a while. I know his plan quite well, but what other things might be on somebody's mind? Any questions? Yes.
Hold on, let me get the.
Awesome business idea. A couple days ago, I read a really interesting article about Ohio and its openness to having foreign investors purchase tons of farming land. Like, for example, in Northwest Ohio, there's some counties that have over 40,000 acres owned by Chinese investors, and in Southeast Ohio, a lot of Germans own a ton of land. So does the presence of a lot of foreign landowners affect your business model when you're approaching people to make sales, or have you even thought about that or anything?
That's an interesting question. Agriculture is the biggest business in the state of Ohio, like it is in most Midwest states. It's billions and billions of dollars of revenue in the state. And I visited, my first year, I visited 100 farms all around the state, and since then I've continued to try and spend a fair amount of time driving around. Every farm I've been on was a family business. And some of these are big time farms, 10,000 acres and more, but it's still a family business. And so I haven't really encountered what you would call, say, corporate farming really at all. It all seems to be pretty much family run.
Another question for Bruce. Parker.
So obviously the farms are getting bigger. More people are farming more acres. Probably a small farmer is doing 3,000 acres, something like that. How is that affecting your distribution and your future plans to get your product out?
Okay, yeah, it is true. I think I think the numbers in Ohio there's still like 75,000 individual farms in the state. And so it's still, a lot of small business, family-run type operations. But the trend is definitely every year, some of the smaller farmers get out of the business and they rent their land, say, to one of the bigger operators. And that every year that continues to happen. The equipment is getting bigger, larger, more sophisticated. And to make that kind of capital investment, you just got to have more and more acres under your management. And so that's the trend. But it's still a lot of small businesses, and so I think that actually helps for us as a small business to get in with, say, some of the smaller farms first, and then as they have success, that that gets the neighbors' attention, and that leads to more and more business. But I would say the whole trend of farms getting larger means that we can't just do this on our own as a small manufacturing company. We have to partner. And so it does kind of come back to the pivot that we made and really focusing on more of a business-to-business type of model. We're not going to be able to do this ourselves, and the trends toward the future just support that even more.
Bruce, can you talk a little bit about how when you made the pivot, can you talk a little bit about how you made that decision and how you communicated it to shareholders and to your board, how you persuaded your board to support it?
Well, we negotiated a contract that had a good monthly payment for us as a part of our development. And so it was pretty clear that here was a source of revenue. And we didn't know, originally, we didn't really know, the basic pivot was to take on joint development projects with other biologics companies where they would pay us initially a little bit of money. We would do, say, downstream product development for them, look at their microorganism in our delivery system. So we did a number of those type projects that led to some more projects. So with one other company, Pivot Bio, that has now led to, a commercial launch, which was what we were so busy with here back in February and March. So I would say for the 3Bar board, when we were able to demonstrate that, here's a real source of revenue that is potentially significant, and it leads to, the opportunity for growth that we just wouldn't have access to if we were trying to just sell our own product. I think it was a pretty easy push, huh?
Yeah, it wasn't that hard to get us convinced, but there were some of us on the board, who really wanted to accelerate the delivery system as well. And so the question the board had to wrestle with, A or B, okay, which one, because as a startup, you only have so much money, you need to place, your bet. So it was more of you still were doing both A or B, but we started to put most of our money on the B portion, which was the delivery system and the partnerships. And then, the process we used is a, normal board meeting, board vote, and communicated the results.
Yeah, which really was, again, the start of the company was with this interesting library of microbes at Ohio State. And, not that there's anything wrong with that. There's some really we continue to mine that library. But there's a lot of other organizations, both universities and companies, that are also doing this kind of research. And so if we can open up our business model to a lot more of those discovery works, that just creates a lot more opportunity for us.
Yes. Parker. We got to get to Parker. He keeps raising his hand here.
Well, I want to be deferential. So it's always a really encouraging sign for an investor when a strategic investor gets interested in putting money into a company. Strategic investor is a company that's in the industry that the company's solving a problem for, and sometimes those companies also want to make small investments in companies that might be able to solve their problems. So, Bruce, without naming your strategic investor, because we don't want to reveal, what can you tell us about the pluses and maybe drawbacks of having a strategic investor on your cap table?
Yeah, that's a great question, because a lot of the companies, especially some of the larger corporate entities that we talk with about our technology, they also have venture investment arms, and that is absolutely the way agriculture is going, is through the mergers and consolidations that have been happening, both on the nutrient side as well as on all the input side. There's fewer and fewer and larger companies, but they realize that to innovate, they have to rely on smaller companies to do the innovation, and then they become the big commercialization arm after it's been de-risked a little bit. And so, there's a lot of say pros and cons about going with a strategic. In our case, it was more on the distribution side, versus the manufacturing input side. And so it was, I would say, a very easy fit, very, very friendly investor, and they haven't tried to dictate, that we channel our technology in one specific direction. But that's absolutely a watch out, is that, and I saw this in my own corporate career, that a lot of times when a big company gets involved in investing in a small company's idea, that idea just never makes it. And it gets a little bit squashed by the corporate drive and the change in direction that might happen.
Have you given any thought to foreign markets?
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, so Dave mentioned the Andhra Pradesh, which is it's an eastern state in India, big agricultural state in India. So I went there and in a pitch competition, won an award, and we got this nice trophy back in the lab. But they also offered some money if we would set up an office there. So that's something we're still evaluating. It's not something to be done lightly. But we're really interested in the idea of our delivery system. It delivers a fresh population of a probiotic organism, and that has application in all kinds of crops as well as for animals and humans. And farmers in Africa, farmers in India are really struggling, and they need a lot of help to improve the productivity and their sustainability of their practices, and we think our delivery system could be an interesting answer to that. And so it's really just a question of how do we fund enough research to enable getting into those kind of markets. But absolutely. Brazil is another one that's, you hear about Brazil it's our main competitor on soybeans, but they grow a lot of stuff there as well. And so it's another market we're interested in.
I feel like Vanna White walking back and forth across this room.
So I was just curious, has there been any challenges you've seen or experienced at the rate of growth and development your company has experienced? Or has it been pretty easygoing?
Oh yeah, everything's just peachy, right? No, I would say specifically, our sales of our own product, it has not developed as fast as we would want it to develop. And so our ability, and I attribute that, we've got some really happy customers using the product, but going through these, existing retailers, they've got 100 other things to sell. And if they can get to our product and if they're effective at selling it, there's a lot of ifs before they get to a successful sale. And that has not gone as well as we had hoped, selling the microbe that we're licensing from Ohio State. And so again, that's where being open to this pivot, being open to another way of both driving revenue and where we ultimately see the greatest potential for the company is not in selling our own product with a licensed microbe. It's really helping a number of other biologics companies. So no, I would say, I don't know, somebody told me one time that every startup goes through at least 3 near-death experiences. And we've been through probably 2.5. So probably have at least another one to go here.
Hopefully more than that, but yes.
As I was listening to you, I was filtering it, applying it to other types of things, startup-wise. And one thing that I really loved that you said was about the delivery system. That was the key. That was the bridge between the feet on the ground and your product. And my question is there obviously is an educational gap between the farmer and the science. And has there been something, and I'm sure you find similarities and differences in particular markets, but have you found a common, maybe an educational part to your process for the farmers on the ground? Is that something that has been integrated in that process?
Yeah, well, you're absolutely right. Education is a big gap. It's a big challenge for us is to provide that education. One thing that's really helping is that biologics has become a very crowded space. All the big ag companies have gotten into it in one way or the other. And you might say that could be bad, that's competition for us. But on the flip side, it's validating this whole segment, and there's a lot of people talking about microbes and living biologic products and how they can start to displace some of the synthetic fertilizer and some of the synthetic pesticides that farmers have had to rely on today. Those are just tools that the farmer's going to use, the tools that work, that help them to be a profitable and sustainable operation. They care about their land, and I think the issue with synthetic chemicals, they've done some great things in the last 50 years, but they've also got some real issues that are quite apparent now. And so we're just trying to, as the industry is really starting to make this move over to biologics, we've got a role to play in that education part. And for us, it's really particularly talking about these microorganisms as living things, as living organisms, and you got to treat them a little bit differently than you might treat a synthetic chemical.
Any other remaining questions? One.
So you've mentioned quite a bit about your delivery system, and you're using it with competitors. Is it under patent, and how long did that process take?
Yeah, great question. One of the very first things I did was file a provisional patent application, pretty much the same month as we founded the company. And believe it or not, we're still undergoing prosecution in the United States and Europe. We got several years ago, the patent was actually granted in Australia. So if you're filing internationally, definitely file in Australia because you'll get a granted patent. Hopefully, you'll get a grant. They have the fastest patent office in the world, from my experience. But the U.S., no, we're still, we're kind of, we're in our third round of back and forth with the patent office right now. It's a lengthy process. I would say if I was going to do it again, I would have paid a couple of $1,000 extra and done the fast track process because the U.S. Patent Office is completely clogged.
All right, unless we have other questions, I'd like to thank Bruce. Everyone give a round of applause for all the time Dave and Bruce spent up here. Thank
Good job,
you.